The rain fell in steady sheets over Buckingham Palace that grey afternoon, as if the sky itself sensed the way to what was about to unfold. Inside the private apartments, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Footmen moved with quiet precision. Security stood a fraction taller than usual. And in the grand drawing room, the most powerful family in Britain had gathered under summons that carried no explanation, only urgency. King Charles III sat at the head of the long table, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Queen Camilla offered a small, steadying smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Across from them sat the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, their posture composed yet alert. Princess Anne occupied her usual place with characteristic directness. Prince Edward and Sophie sat nearby, and, in a decision that had already set tongues wagging among the household staff, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex had been invited to join via secure video link from California, their faces appearing on a large screen at the far end of the room. No one spoke. The only sound was the soft tick of an antique clock and the distant murmur of rain against the windows. Charles cleared his throat. The simple sound cut through the silence like a blade. "I have asked you all here," he began, his voice low but carrying the unmistakable authority of the crown, "because there are matters that can no longer remain unspoken. Matters of the heart, matters of the future, and matters of truth." William's brow furrowed. Catherine's hand found her husband's under the table. On the screen, Harry leaned forward slightly, Meghan's expression carefully neutral. Charles continued, "For more than 70 years I have watched this family, our family, carry the weight of public expectation, private grief, and the unrelenting scrutiny of the world. I have seen joy and I have seen fracture. I have seen duty triumph, and I have seen duty nearly destroy us. And I have come to understand something that has taken me a lifetime to fully accept." He paused. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I am not immortal. None of us are. The time comes for every sovereign when the question is no longer what the crown demands of us, but what we demand of ourselves in service of something greater." A faint rustle of fabric. Someone shifted in their chair. Charles's gaze moved slowly around the table, resting for a moment on each face. William's steady blue eyes, Catherine's quiet strength, and unflinching practicality, Edward's thoughtful reserve, and finally the digital images of Harry and Meghan. "I have spent these past months in deep reflection," the king said, "not only about the institution I inherited from my mother, God rest her soul, but about the people who make that institution human, about the children who grew up in its shadow, about the marriages tested by its glare, about the silences that have grown between us like walls." Camilla reached over and rested her hand lightly on his. He covered it with his own for a brief second before continuing. "There's an announcement I must make, one that will change the shape of this family, and perhaps the shape of the monarchy itself. I do not make it lightly. I make it because the alternative is to continue as we have, drifting further apart while the world watches and waits for us to fail." William's jaw tightened. "Father, what are you saying?" Charles looked at his eldest son with an expression no one in that room had ever quite seen before, something between pride, sorrow, and profound resolve. "I am saying that the time has come for honesty, not the carefully managed version we offer the public. Real honesty, the kind that costs something." He rose slowly from his chair. The movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. Every eye followed him as he walked a few steps toward the tall windows overlooking the rain-soaked gardens. For a long moment he stood with his back to them, watching the water streak the glass. When he turned, his eyes were bright with emotion he no longer tried to conceal. "I have carried secrets," he said quietly. "We all have. Some of them were necessary. Some of them were cowardice dressed as duty. And some of them have hurt the people I love most in this world." Harry's face on the screen had gone still. Meghan's hand moved to rest on his arm. Charles's voice softened further. "There's a truth about the years of distance between us that I have never fully spoken. A truth about the pain that was caused, intentionally or not, and the pride that prevented repair. I have watched my sons become men under pressures I myself once knew, and yet I failed, at critical moments, to stand between them and the storm." Catherine's eyes glistened. William remained motionless, but a muscle worked in his cheek. "And so," Charles continued, "I have made a decision, one that will leave no room for ambiguity, one that will require every person in this room, and those watching from afar, to confront what we have become and what we still might be. He returned to the table and rested both hands on the polished wood. The rain outside intensified, as if nature itself had decided to underscore the moment. I am stepping back from certain public duties sooner than the world expects. Not from weakness, not from illness alone, though the doctors have been clear that my energy is not what it once was. I am stepping back because a crown must prepare for what comes next, and because his family must heal before it can lead. A collective stillness gripped the room. No one interrupted. No one dared. But that is only part of what I must say. Charles went on, his voice gaining strength. The greater part concerns the future of this family as a family, not merely as an institution. I have asked for private conversations in the coming days with each of you. Conversations without cameras, without advisors, without the weight of protocol. Conversations in which I will speak plainly about the past and about the path I believe we must take together. William found his voice. Father, if this is about succession. It is about more than succession, Charles interrupted gently but firmly. It is about whether we will allow the next generation to inherit not only the titles and the responsibilities, but also the fractures. I will not permit that, not while I still draw breath. On the screen, Harry exhaled slowly. Meghan's eyes searched Charles's face as if trying to read every unspoken layer. Princess spoke for the first time, her tone characteristically blunt. Charles, whatever this announcement is, say it clearly. We are not children. A faint, almost sad smile touched the king's lips. No, you are not, and that is precisely why this moment matters. He straightened to his full height. The years seemed to settle on his shoulders, yet somehow he appeared lighter, as though a long-carried burden was finally being set down. What I am about to tell you, he said, will leave this room changed. It will require courage from every one of us, and it will demand that we choose, once and for all, whether love or pride will define the House of Windsor in the years ahead. The clock ticked, the rain fell, and every member of the royal family waited, suspended in the silence, for the words that would leave them speechless. Charles drew a slow breath. The truth is this, Charles said, his voice steady yet thick with feeling. I am abdicating the throne. The words landed like thunder in a silent room. No one moved. No one breathed. The rain against the windows suddenly seemed louder, as though the palace itself had gone still in shock. William's face drained of color. Catherine's hand tightened around his. On the screen, Harry's eyes widened. Meghan's lips parted, but no sound came. Princess sat rigid. Edward stared. Sophie's hand rose halfway to her mouth and stopped. Charles did not look away. He let the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable. I have carried this decision for months, he continued. I have spoken with the doctors. I have spoken with Camilla. I have walked the gardens at Highgrove at dawn and sat alone in the chapel at Windsor long after midnight. And I have reached the only conclusion that feels both honest and necessary. He rested his hands on the back of his chair. My time as king will end before the year is out. William will succeed me. The formal process will begin within weeks. The public will be told in a carefully timed address. But you, his gaze swept the room and the screen. You deserve to hear it first, and you deserve to hear the full reason. William found his voice, though it came out rough. Father, your health is part of it, Charles acknowledged. The cancer has been more stubborn than the public statement suggested. The treatments continue. I am not at death's door, but neither am I the man who can give this role the full strength it demands for another decade. I will not become a diminished king clinging to a crown while the institution suffers. I will watch my mother serve until the very end because that was her nature and her vow. I am a different man, and the monarchy, if it is to survive with meaning, must be allowed to renew itself while there is still time for a clean transition. Camilla's eyes shone, but she remained composed, her hand still resting near his. Charles's voice softened. Yet health alone is not why I am doing this. The deeper reason is you, all of you. He looked first at William and Catherine. You have carried an impossible weight with grace. You have protected your children from the worst of the storm. You have been the steady center when the rest of us have faltered. William, you are ready, more ready than I was at your age. The country will be fortunate to have you. Then his eyes moved to the screen. Harry, Meghan. Harry sat forward, the earlier stillness broken by a visible tension in his shoulders. "I have failed you," Charles said simply. "Not once, but repeatedly. In the years after your mother died, I did not know how to reach you. Later, when the pressures mounted, I chose institutional caution over paternal courage. I allowed distance to harden into something colder. I read the interviews. I watched the documentaries. I felt every public wound as a private one. And still I did not cross the ocean and say the words that needed saying." Harry's jaw worked. Meghan's eyes had filled, though she blinked the tears back with practiced control. "I am saying them now," Charles continued. "I am sorry for the silences, for the times I prioritized the institution over my son, for the ways in which this family, my family, made you feel that belonging required the erasure of self. I cannot rewrite the past, but I can refuse to let it dictate the future." He turned slightly so that he addressed the entire room once more. "This abdication is not only about succession. It is about repair. Before I leave the throne, I intend to do everything in my power to bring this family back into some form of honest relationship. Not the polished version for the cameras. The real one. The messy, difficult, necessary one." Princess Anne spoke, her voice low and precise. "Charles, an abdication of this scale will shake the country. The timing, the optics. Have you considered?" "I have considered everything," he replied, "including the possibility that some will call it weakness. Let them. Strength is not the refusal to change. Strength is a willingness to place the long-term health of the family and the crown above personal pride." William rose slowly from his chair. For a moment he simply stood there, looking at his father as though seeing him across a great distance. "You are certain?" "I am." "And the children? George, Charlotte, Louis, will grow up knowing their grandfather chose them over the illusion of permanence," Charles said. "They will watch their father become king while I am still here to offer whatever quiet counsel he may want. That, to me, is a greater gift than another decade of diminishing returns." Catherine stood as well, her composure exemplary even as emotion colored her voice. "This will be enormous for all of us." "Yes," Charles agreed, "and that is why I need every person in this room. William, you will have my full support in the transition. And Edward, your experience and steadiness will be essential. And Harry," he looked again at the screen, "I am asking you, not as king to subject, but as father to son, to consider coming home for a period of private conversation. No press, no preconditions, just a chance to speak without the world listening. Meghan, you would be welcome in that same spirit." Harry's expression had shifted into something raw, surprise, caution, and a flicker of something that might have been hope. He did not answer immediately. Meghan's hand remained on his arm, a silent anchor. Charles drew a breath that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "I know this leaves you all speechless. That was never my intention for its own sake. But some truths cannot be delivered gently enough to avoid impact. I love this family. I love the institution I was born to serve. And I love the possibility that, before I step down, we might yet become something closer to whole." He looked around the room one final time, at the faces of those who had shared his life in privilege and in pain, in ceremony and in private sorrow. "The announcement to the nation will come soon. Until then, this remains among us. I ask only that you sit with what I have said. Speak to one another, and when you are ready, speak to me." No one replied. The rain continued its soft percussion against the glass. The antique clock ticked on, indifferent to the history that had just shifted inside those walls. King Charles III remained standing at the head of the table, a man who had finally chosen the harder honesty over the safer silence. Around him, the royal family sat and stood in stunned quiet, speechless, altered, and facing a future none of them had expected when they entered the room. Outside, the storm showed no sign of ending. Inside, a different kind of weather had already begun.